Hey, Doctor, welcome to the Edge Television broadcast.
Sure thing. As the
Well,
bear said, rock on, right?
you listen to the Bear Report. Yes, that's right. He
I
says rock
did.
on. He
Listen to
gives
the
us a
bear
lot of good
report.
information every Saturday night, and we archive those too as well. This is about our
Oh,
1,000 something show tonight, Doctor. And man, as long as I've been doing this program since 2004, I got to tell you, self-mummification, Christian mummification at all has
uh,
never, ever come up. And certainly I want to talk to you about it. And I think we can maybe even be able to get into maybe possibility of UFO activity or who's flying them. But Doctor, before we get
who
going, why
knows?
don't you kind of introduce yourself to the audience, who you are and what you're about?
Sure. Well, I live in Narragansett, Rhode Island, and used to do tour groups to Japan and other countries yearly. And I, for years, would just travel through Tokyo, Kyoto, and Hiroshima. And then I think it was in 2005, I decided to explore the northernmost regions of Japan. And my whole plan was that I'd head on into Siberia and check out things I've never seen before in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really strange thing that got me involved with writing about mummification. I never thought I'd be doing this kind of thing. But I was on a train between Sapporo and Asahikawa in northern Japan. And I told an old gentleman that I was sitting next to what I was doing there. And he said, have you heard about this Sokushimbutsu? And I don't know what that term meant. And I speak Japanese. It's not the best Japanese, but I speak Japanese. And I'm looking this term up. It's not coming up anywhere. So I asked him about it. And I still think I'm misunderstanding him because he's telling me about these guys who mummified themselves. So what I started doing was researching self-mummification because it was one of the weirdest things I've ever heard of. And then after years of doing that, translating books, writing books, being on other podcasts, writing articles, being on TV, I ended up writing books on Christian mummification and then exploring South American mummification. And it really kind of, I know this sounds weird. I'm probably a weirdo, but I got obsessed with this and just trying to figure out, well, why would these people do this? It just doesn't make sense. And obviously, it just led me naturally into the other things. So right now, I'm no longer working on any projects to do with mummification. My co-author, I've been involved with martial arts for many years, and my co-author for four of our books, three related to martial arts, one related to art, is Walter von Krenner out in Kalispell, Montana.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I right now are working on another art book. Specifically, I know this will sound boring for the majority of people who hear it, but for he and I, we find it interesting. We're working on a book on Japanese, Korean, and Chinese ceramics.
Mm. Hey,
And of course, most people they hear that and like, well, why? Why would you waste your time with that?
mm-hmm.
You know?
Speaking of Japan, I got a question, unrelated. Maybe you even touched on it, I don't know. But is there a forest there where you go to kill yourself?
Yes, that's Aokigahara. It's one of the strangest things, and they're no longer in print now. But I used to write articles for a magazine called Kanzai Time Out, and it was specific to the Kyoto area. And I wrote one article. I wrote a lot of articles on the self-mummified monks, on some other religious locations that are kind of unheard of in Japan. But I wrote one article on the suicide forest, and it was kind of strange. Like even today, that if you go into that forest, there is a possibility you'll find a body of someone who actually killed himself or herself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where that actually came from, there's been legends for as I've looked at like old Japanese myths, and I see these legends of this being a location where people on this realm of existence can access the nether realms, or you normally don't hear like heavenly realms, but
Mm-hmm.
in Buddhism and Shinto, it works a little bit differently. It's just a gateway to another world. But what's really strange, I know in the Momoyama period that this area was used to dispose of older relatives. And it sounds terrible, but most of the time it was in times of famine. The oldest relatives say, you know what, we don't have enough food for the kids. I'm okay dying now. And then they would go there. So I know it sounds awful. It wasn't necessarily like someone else is deciding for them, one of those. But the whole area has been associated with death for as long as I can
Mm-hmm.
find in
Mm-hmm.
the research.
Mm.
It's interesting. It's weird.
So it's so interesting. You're talking about self mummification, and of course there's the Christian mummification too as well. But uh, are you suggesting that people begin to mummify themselves while they're still alive?
Yeah, and as weird as this sounds, the process lasted between 1 year and 3 years, depending on the person who did it. It was an involved process and kind of gruesome, kind of excruciating when you hear it. And I'll tell you all about it if you want.
Yeah, that's why we have you on. We want to hear all about it. But here, let me get a picture here now. In the background, we have from your website. It's a mummy, or
Yep.
is this a mummified person?
It is, but this is not completely mummified. If you look closely at his hands, which I don't know if you can see in the picture on my screen, you really can't. His hands are mummified, his back is mummified, the rest of him kind of fell apart.
Hmm.
But if you go to my website, kenjeremiah.com, there's some pictures. And if you go to the Facebook site, Self-Mummified Monks, you'll see a ton of pictures on that. And to tell you the truth, if anyone wants pictures, just reach out to me afterwards.
Hmm.
All my contact information is available online, and I can direct you to the right places.
Well, I actually had a line waiting for this one here because in the political realm, there's something called Orange Man Bad, and so this realm is Orange Mummy Bad. I'm just thinking. I don't know. So
I don't know.
wow. But anyway, so you're saying then that that people will find something. Do they eat something to mummify themselves, or do they inject it in their veins? What do they do?
It's really interesting. I can get into the background of this, like where the ideas actually come from. But the majority of people who did this were members of two different religious sects. So you have a Buddhist sect called Shingon Buddhism,
Hmm.
which was brought to Japan by Kukai from China. And then you had another religious, spiritual practice called Shugendo. And its legendary founder was Enno Gyoja. Where it really came from, I personally think it was just codified ascetic practices that people in the area, people out in the mountainside, people in grass huts were practicing, and then they put these things together for their followers, saying, you know what, if you want to attain some of the things I attained, this is what I did. And a lot of these guys that I'm going to talk about, they're credited with numerous miracles where, like, curing blindnesses. There was an eye illness in Edo at the time that was going rampant. Some of these guys ended up curing a whole bunch of people via inexplicable means. And then people for years after started going to them. And this is one of the reasons behind their mummification.
Hmm.
But they started going to them and found that they were actually being cured. So these were considered, to use a Christian word, it'd be like a saint. To use a Buddhist, a Mahayana Buddhist word, bodhisattva. Theravada Buddhist word, arhat. If you use a Jainist term, these people are sants.
Hmm.
So there's all these different terms. In Islam, awilallah, people close to God, right? So every tradition has these different terms. They're just different terms to describe something that really can't be explained using our normal nomenclature. What we normally say, it can't be explained. But these guys, oh, go ahead, please.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I was going to say, I was thinking, I was thinking kind of through history, other events that may have happened or occurred that I know about. I think that in the Bible, there's a story that when Jesus raised from the dead, that it said that the people that were buried came up out of the ground and they started walking around. Now, either they were mummies, or they were zombies, or they came back to life. I'm not sure, but they wrote that some strange stuff was going on. But let me ask them, this guy in the back here, and people like him, I don't know, are they still? I guess that's a question too. Are they people after they're mummified? But is there any record, doctor, that they came back to life?
No, and tell you the truth, obviously, when you're reading anything, you could be reading it figuratively or considering that the events actually happen the way they're told. Me personally, when I take a look at some biblical stories, I think they were figurative. When I look at Buddhist stories, I think a lot of them are figurative, saying, well, what are we really talking about? And I'm going to get back to how these guys did what they did, but just dealing with the overall worldly perspective, if you truly think there's some sort of a heavenly realm or a hellish realm and people, once they die, travel there, then who we think we are isn't exactly who we are. Like our flesh and blood might not be us, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'd be more of a spiritual essence that, in that once you shed the body, like a cicada sheds its husk, once you shed the body, that's the real you that travels on to other realms. So when we look at these guys, and this guy in particular that you have on your screen, this is the very first self-mummified monk that I
Mm-hmm.
ever saw.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the temple. This is Dainichibo Temple in a town called Oami, and it's really close to a whole bunch of the other self-mummified monks. But I got in there, I saw this guy for the first time, and I wasn't overly impressed at the mummification because you look at it, it looks like a skeleton. This is a different. This one is Emyokai, and this guy's located in Sakai, up in northern Japan. He is near perfectly preserved,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll see a weird coating on his skin. It's because after
Mm-hmm.
they pulled him up and he was preserved, they actually lacquered him,
Wow.
which would prevent further decay. And the same
Mm-hmm.
type of thing happened in Christian mummification. But typically, what these guys would do, if we consider that there's a spiritual essence in the body and the flesh and blood isn't the real us, it's just the shell,
Mm-hmm.
these guys thought that by engaging in ascetic practices, that they would develop a type of merit, a type of power called merit. And the same exact thing occurs in Orthodox and Catholic Christianity, and I'll get into that in a little bit if you'd like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they thought that by engaging in these grueling ascetic practices up in the mountains of northern Japan, that they would develop more spiritual power that they could use to enact miracles and help people. So they
Mm-hmm.
really wanted to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
But they recognized that their own death would approach. And the real problem was, if they died and the body decayed, then the merit that they accumulated could no longer help others.
Mm-hmm.
So they came up with this idea. Well, it wasn't actually their idea, although they modified it. I believe it came from the Chinese Taoist practices, and they had this whole realm of practices for immortality. And immortality didn't mean immortality, it was actually trying to keep the spirit intact when the body died.
Mm-hmm.
But the guys in northern Japan, they adopted some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And what they started doing, they adopted a diet that was called Mokujiki-gyo. And if you look at the Japanese characters for that, it means tree eating, but they started eating tree bark.
Mm-hmm.
And they cut out all grains. And over time, they continued to cut out the grains and then ingested pine needles, pine bark, pine resin. And obviously, those were all preservative elements. And over the course of either 1 year, 3 years, and sometimes way longer than that, they gradually starved themselves to death. At the end of their time, when they thought they were ready for death, they'd find a place to bury themselves alive. They'd dig a hole for their grave. They'd sit inside, and then their followers would insert a bamboo breathing tube, and the monks would sit in there chanting, ringing a bell until they died. And once
Oh.
the followers heard the bell stop ringing, they assumed the man had died. They removed the bamboo breathing tube, sealed the tomb, and left it alone for 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, they unearthed him. And if he had mummified, they redressed him, cleaned the body, and then enshrined them in a special hall, like a saint would be enshrined underneath altars in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And if they didn't mummify, just like Christianity, they performed an exorcism. I shouldn't say Christianity. Just like Orthodox and Catholic Christianity, they performed an exorcism and then reburied the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I think there's about 8 guys in Yamagata Prefecture that are
Mm-hmm.
still on display, and there's maybe about 20 individuals in other parts of Japan that are not on display.
Well, I'll tell you what, Doctor. I mean, it seems to me that at some point, one of these guys will be buried, and they got a straw coming down, and maybe he's ringing a bell saying, "I changed my mind. Let me the hell out of here, man." I mean, but I don't think they're going to get that chance. So they hear that bell ringing. Oh, he's having a great time down there. Okay, he's going to come up. But now so you did mention Europe. You know, there's another practice, obscure, dealing with the dead bodies in Europe, where they were discovering bodies that were buried with bricks shoved in their mouths. Are you aware of that practice?
I am not aware of that at all.
And
But I find it interesting.
the background story on that is they believe there's certain parts of in Transylvania and other places they believe that there were vampires, and by putting the brick in the mouth of the deceased that was suspected to be a vampire, they believed that that body couldn't come up out of the ground and haunt the living as a vampire. So it looks like humans have been dealing with other people's dead bodies for a long time. We've got a question here, though, because we do have people watching the program. Questions are coming in.
I can't see
So
their
it
questions.
says, were the Asian people given birth by a dragon? Do they believe they were given birth by a dragon?
I think I'm not an expert in Chinese mythology, but from what I understand, there are some myths regarding dragons that live on the bottom of the sea that had something to do with the creation of humankind, or at least the origin of humankind. I shouldn't say creation, the origin, something to do with it. But I'm not an expert on that. I'm not completely aware of it.
Okay, and this is from Kevin. He asked the question, says, Doctor, did they build their pyramid before mummifications? Now, there's a little confusion there because pyramids obviously indicating Egyptians. And then, of course, they've been mummifying people too. It seems like their practice is completely different because they're wrapped, but it's the figures you've been showing that we got from you show they're not wrapped.
Yeah, and there are pyramids found all over the world. In Japan, I've never seen one. I don't think any have been unearthed if they do exist, but obviously we have the largest pyramids in the world here in Mexico. We got pyramids all throughout South America. You obviously have Egyptian pyramids, there's pyramids in many other countries. These individuals had nothing to do with pyramids, nothing at all. And when you're dealing with Egyptian mummification, you think of them being wrapped. Yes, most of them were wrapped, but the poorer people, to enact mummification, they might not have had the money for more elaborate mummification. The simplest type of mummification in Egypt was simply burying the body in the sand, where it would naturally desiccate. They'd pull them out and the body's mummified. But the more money you have, or the more important you are, obviously wealth equates with power. The more money you have, the more powerful you are, the more elaborate the burial procedures. And then obviously they'd read from the Book of the Dead and remove the internal organs with the exception of the heart and take it from there. But this is completely different, unrelated.
And I was thinking about the Egyptian mummies, and I'm going to relate something from the COVID-19 test. Now, because that's why they call me the cowboy. Okay, you don't know what you're getting with me. I'm like a box of chocolates, man. Okay,
So we have to get the bear back here.
so,
I know he said rock on, but I don't know.
so here you go. Now the Egyptians, they used to take their enemies. Now, I can go back to the Aztecs. They would go to the top of their pyramids, and then their enemies, they would cut the heart out alive. Then they'd throw the body down. Really roll down. Sometimes cut the head off, and they'd roll the head down. But they would take the body. They wanted the heart. While a beating heart out of their enemies. Well, the Egyptians, they wanted the brain, and they found tools. And one of these tools to do that is it goes up through the nose, and it has a turn thing, and they shove it up so far that then they actually turn this thing, and it's in your brain, and it liquefies the brain, and then they would catch as your brain would come through your nose. I know it's weird, but hey, we're talking about dead things. Why not? But then that reminded me of this COVID test. The test swab, if I get my fingers right here, is about that long. There it is. It's about this long. Okay, so it goes up through your nose, and dude, you're gonna be hitting brain. Okay, as long as this thing is, you got to be hitting brain. And I was thinking that this COVID-19 test is kind of like the Egyptians, stirring the brain up and then draining out the nose. Anyway, that's just the mind of a cowboy. But
what's funny, I think Trump actually talked about the first test with the original test, where the thing was so long that he felt it, and he might have been joking, but he said he felt it behind his eye.
Yeah.
But I think it was even tonight's broadcast where he was talking about the newest test that's really non-invasive. But
and thank goodness for that. I'm holding out for the. I'm holding out for the non-invasive. There's a saliva one, there's a pinprick, but man, that swab thing going up the brain. I mean, that thing is longer than your nose. It's in your brain. Okay, they're sticking stuff up in there, so hopefully your brain won't come out. All right, Paul she's one of our previous guests watching the program. Says, Doctor, have you heard of giants being found that have been mummified?
By giants, extremely large, extremely tall Caucasians in places where historical references say there shouldn't have been large Caucasians? Yes. And the most famous of those in China are the Tarim Basin mummies, excuse me, the Tarim Basin mummies. So if you wanted to type that in online, you'll see a whole bunch of Caucasians that are well over 6'5". Some of them over 7 feet, and they're wearing tartan cloths and things that don't seem to make any sense in the area. And obviously, this is a leap. But me looking at all the unexplained stories from South American societies, the Mayans, the Aztec, the Inca, where they were taught after a worldwide cataclysm, a worldwide flood, where everything was destroyed, they say they were taught agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, and everything else by large Caucasians who they recognized as divine-like people, but only because they had technology that the natives didn't have. So if you had no idea what a ship was, and people approached with ships and maybe even had guns on them, you might think that this is alien or divine. But what if it isn't? If you strip away those kind of additions to the story, if you strip that away and just take a look at their real narrative, that Caucasians who were extremely tall came and taught them these things, and then you see the mummies that show up in China, there's others in Europe and different places where these really large Caucasians, there might be some truth to it. Now, whether or not we could ever get to the bottom of that, it's just a matter of waiting, just a matter of time. But obviously, with everything going on right now, there's more important things, right?
There, I put in my Facebook post about this upcoming show. I said in this day of here, let me see how I wrote that. I think I said, let me get this. I want to read this. So you would know. I don't think we're Facebook friends, although I'll try to look you up and get you in there. But
I'll send you a friend request right after this.
Okay. All right. I said tonight on the Edge broadcast will be Dr. Kenneth Jeremiah. And then I go, in these days of quarantines and apocalyptic fears, there's no other topic that can bring us all together like Christian mummification. And so that's why, so we're all coming together, man. We're all going to bust out of our quarantine anyway. All right. So Gladys Kravis says, Doctor, where's the best preserved mummy you've ever seen?
You're talking in general or with the self-mummified monks?
Well, you just pick one and
So I'll answer both, since I don't know which one he's referring to.
Okay.
Dealing with the self-mummified monks, one of the pictures you showed was Emyokai. It was the guy who had been lacquered.
Mm-hmm.
He's very well preserved. Right next to him in the same temple in Sakata is one of his students, Chukai. And Chukai is also like equally well preserved. In Italy, there's a town called Ferrantello, which is just north of Rome, and there's a Church of St. Stephen. And when you go into the church, if you go down below, the original church, which I believe was from the 1200s, might be 1300s, but whatever it was, the basement area, so the crypt area is still there. And there's all these mummies that they were all naturally preserved, and they look white. So they have like a whitish tint, but all of their flesh is intact, and their bodies are in perfect condition. But now dealing with, of all the places I've seen, all the mummies I've seen, the most intact body, the most intact mummy I've ever seen is a little girl named Rosalia Lombardo, who died in the 1800s. And if you go to Sicily, Italy, there's a crypt of the Capuchins, and they have mummified bodies everywhere. You walk down the corridor, and there's mummies on both sides. You'll have a room of professors where it's all mummified teachers, a room of women, all mummified women, a room of children. And at the very end of it, you have in a glass case this little girl. And I suggest, anyone who's listening to this, I suggest looking up online, Rosalia Lombardo, and you'll see this body that looks like she's still alive. It really looks like she's still alive. And that's incredible preservation I've ever seen.
Okay, so there. I mean, if you go down in the guest list of the Edge broadcast, you will see every kind of guest and topic imaginable.
I actually looked through it, and it was interesting.
And so we got something for you, no matter who you are.
Yeah,
So
I like it.
But we had a guest on, and we're talking about possession, exorcism, and that type of thing. And I think it was a ghost hunter. And the guy was called to a woman's house who had a doll collection, and the dolls were hanging from strings around the roof of a certain room.
Hmm.
And he said he walked in there, and all those dolls twisted and looked right at him. Now those things obviously were animated by something, and of course over time there's the stories and the lores of things being animated that were previously dead or inanimate. Now I don't know what the phobia is called, but nutcrackers freak me out, man, because I think those things come alive at night. They haunt you around Christmas time. They're standing there with those teeth, those not gnarly teeth.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, I thought I had a bite mark on my leg one time, so I don't want them in my house. But these dolls twisted, which means they were animated. Isn't it possible that these mummies could be animated by something?
I've never heard of anything like that.
Well, the reason
I've
let me
never heard of-
follow up a little bit, give you a little bit more, because the whole process of mummifying, they expected to be preserved to do good work, as you say, but isn't most things have a grain of truth to them? Like maybe it actually worked one time, and somebody's trying to replicate that.
I would agree with that. That when I look at myths and legends, I'm always thinking that what is being told is not actually the truth, but it's based on real truth. I look at the same thing with real religious stories. So when you have, doesn't matter what religion it is, when you have tales of the Savior, the founder, the Messiah, whatever you want to word the person, it doesn't matter what faith, you can go back through time, look at Zoroastrianism, it doesn't matter, any of them. I always think we can't take this at face value, but they're trying to get across, one, possible historical things, and two, possible lessons for ethics and spiritual progress. So I'm always trying to find the truth in those. When I hear stories, and maybe it's my prejudice because I've never experienced some sort of really supernatural event. But when I hear stories about, this dead body turned around, okay, obviously human minds can get carried away a little bit. I mean, it's pretty easy to look at a cloud and see something like, oh, that's a face. This is a dog. But it's not really a face or a dog. It's that we have, and there is a term for this, and I'm not a psychologist or whatever kind of scientist would actually deal with this. There is a term for the tendency of humans to put things that they already know up against something that's unknown. And again, I'm not an expert on this. I don't know what the term is, but I'm always thinking if someone looks at, like the nutcracker you have in the back, if you look at that, maybe somehow you'd look and equate that with something in a childhood or a movie or something else you saw and say, you know what, that thing is really scary, But I wouldn't think this thing would ever come alive.
Let's go back, man. You've done so much research, and I've got all kinds of books that we grabbed from your website and from Amazon that you've written and various things. And but you just said that you've never had a supernatural experience in all this research, or even in your life unrelated to research, not one?
No, and I also have an issue with the term supernatural.
Okay.
Because if we say supernatural, it's something above and beyond nature.
Okay.
I believe there's tons of things in nature that we just haven't been able to explain yet. So if we look at something like, okay, I don't know what that is, it's supernatural, that doesn't make sense to me. How is it outside of nature? There's no way we understand everything. New creatures from the deep oceans are discovered yearly. There's so many things about this planet we don't even know yet. Like everything we have, including our ideas about how we move through the solar system, they're all theories. There's nothing concrete saying this is definite now. We know this is definite. So no, I haven't had any experience. I've had a lot of weird experiences and things that I would say very spiritual, especially up in northern Japan. I spent years in Zen, that kind of thing. Yeah, I'd say tons of spiritual events, but I wouldn't refer to any of them as supernatural. No.
Okay, and I guess it's a matter of opinion, or the definition, a person's definition of supernatural. What would be your definition of supernatural?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think the term makes any sense.
Okay. Okay. So,
Like I'm a linguist by trade. I'm a linguist.
mhm.
Just looking at that term, supernatural, to me, like, okay, something outside of nature, how is that even possible? You know, so to me, it doesn't make a lot of
Okay.
sense.
All right. So if somebody sees a ghost, that's not supernatural.
I wouldn't necessarily say so. No,
Okay.
if someone
Okay.
saw something like that, I
Hmm.
I think there'd be some sort of an explanation that fits into our scheme of things.
Hmm.
But it just might not be something that we've thought of yet, or that makes any sense yet. One boss, I don't remember who did this, but whoever did it, I thought it summed it up great. When you see some sort of a image of a deceased person or something like that, often in the reports, you'll see something like I looked into like haunted places, especially in New England, since I'm a New Englander.
Hmm.
But I specifically spoke to some people in Salem, Mass, and they said, "Oh yeah, this hotel, you'll always see this girl who died here, and she'll walk down the stairs, stop, and go back up." I said, "Well, what else does she do?" He's like, "No, that's it. She walks down the stairs, stops, and then goes back up." And it's like a recording. So my thought might have been, it's actually not my thought. I saw someone come up with, and I wish I knew this person's name, but once I read this, it like solidified this idea for me, and it became my thought as well that maybe this is like a recording, and we just can't figure out how it happens yet. That somehow that impression was
Hmm.
so finely etched into the nature of our reality, to for lack of a better term,
Hmm.
that even after her death, you see this ghost go down and then back up. You see it a ton in Catholic Christianity. And they say, oh, yeah, the saint will always appear here, but
Hmm.
why always there?
Hmm. Hmm.
Why does it always move the same way?
Hmm.
And then you have also, it seems unrelated at first, but the individuals who get stigmatism, so you'll have like images of the crucifixion nails
Hmm.
in the hands and the feet. Well, we
Okay.
obviously know, based on historical research, that there's no way it could have gone through the hands. Couldn't support a body. It had to have gone through here, and it must have been tied here. And with the feet, it had to have gone through the sides of the nails. It could not have gone through the top of the feet. But you'll see a whole bunch of people, including some who are now considered Orthodox and Catholic saints, that the stigmatism showed up in the wrong place. The stigmata are in the wrong place. They're where they appeared in the image that the people prayed in front of. So
Hmm.
I really think that the mind has some powers that have yet to be completely explored. And two, because of that, I really think it's related that even after death, sometimes the spiritual essence of people can be recorded. Like, think of the old records where you have like a chasm. Like, think of the little tiny things on a
Hmm.
record and just
Hmm.
make it mentally bigger for a minute. There are little chasms that are different. And when you pull that needle around them, they replay. Well, why can't that happen with visual images? That's
So,
my thought on it.
okay. So, do you think people have spirits?
Yes, yes, I do.
Okay.
But I think
And
the
what would,
spirit is the real us,
okay.
and the body is just a shell.
Okay. So you're saying that the spirit of a person indwells a organic body.
Yes,
And then are you suggesting then that the spirit goes on after the meat suit expires?
I think so. Yes.
Hmm. And where does it go?
Well, that's the other interesting thing. Why does it have to go anywhere?
Maybe it wants to stay.
Well, think of this. If we just switched, so you have the animated portion and the inanimate portion, which becomes animated once it's infused with spirit, right? If it were the opposite, now the physical flesh is the real person, and you ask, okay, where are you going? Uh, oh, I'm here. Why do I need to go anywhere?
Wait a minute. You might be the one hunting everybody if you're not going anywhere.
No,
So,
it'd be the same type of deal.
I mean, these people
And
need to be helped to move. If somebody's still there after they're dead, I'll say, listen, man, move to the light. Okay, go that way. Leave me
well,
the hell
that's
alone, man. All right, here's another question for you. Has there been any curses related to any of the mummies taken out of the crypts or the tombs?
there are a whole bunch of unusual stories from Egypt, but of course, when people looked into it, it turned out to be certain viruses that had been basically still activated within the tombs that made people sick.
Mm-hmm.
In South America, same type of deal where people getting too close to some of the bodies, they got sick. But as far as like real curses, I think the whole idea of curse came up when people would get sick around dead bodies. In I shouldn't say that again. In Catholic Christianity, bodies were intentionally mummified because, especially in Italy, people wanted to be close to the bodies of people they deemed holy.
Mm-hmm.
They, in some cases, wanted to kiss the body, hold the hands, and that makes people sick. As far as Japan, the self-mummified monks, there was one individual. It's not really a curse, but it was considered a haunting for the people who experienced it. There's a body, and if you type this in online, I think a picture of him will show up. If not, again, reach out to me, and you just have to do it in Japanese instead. It'll show up. But Tetsuryukai, it's this individual who wanted to become a self-mummified monk, and he's training for years, and he got sick and died. So they buried him like a normal person. And after his burial, two people, one was a priest and the other was actually in charge of the gravesite. This individual who had died started appearing to both of them in dreams and saying, "You have to dig me up. You have to prepare my body. You have to enshrine me." And after weeks of this, like nightly dreams featuring the both of them, the two of them got together and they compared their dreams. And they said, "Yep, the exact same thing has been happening to me. I want it to stop." Now, at the time, it was illegal to dig up a body. So at night, they went out and they dug this body up. They cleaned him off. They brought him back to Churen Temple, that's in Yamagata Prefecture, and they enshrined him. And after that, the dream stopped. At some point later, his body was moved, and it's now, if anyone is in northern Japan and you go to what's the name of it? Whatever the capital of Yamagata is, I'm having a mind mind fog right now. Whatever the capital of Yamagata is, though, if you get to that, Tsuruoka. Tsuruoka. So if you go to Tsuruoka Temple, it's in like a 10-minute walk from Tsuruoka Temple. You'll see this body, and anyone can visit it. It's in Japanese, but there's a street sign that says self-mummified monk, Sokushimbutsu.
Whoa. You know, there's a scripture where Jesus says, let the dead bury the dead. So that's kind of spooky right there. I mean, I'm not sure if the dead are supposed to come out of the grave, or maybe he meant people who are so far out of touch of life, they don't maybe not have a spirit, or a spirit that's a good spirit. I mean, there seems to me, I mean, I don't know if you believe there is evil in the world, but maybe an evil person doesn't have quite the spirit that a good person would, and therefore considered dead in that sense. All right, Dreamwalker says, Doctor, what's the most bizarre mummification you've seen?
Me personally, there are some rather humorous mummies I've seen in Peru, in which they call them mummies, but if you look at the bodies, they're so terribly preserved that I would just say they're skeletons. There are certain parts that are mummified, but I wouldn't call it mummification. And yet they stick a toupee on the top of them. That's one of the weirdest, most bizarre types of mummification I've ever seen. Even though the way I would word it, that's how they word it. I would word it as dressing up a skeleton.
Wow.
I like your little memes there.
Okay. So, hey,
weird stuff out there.
Meow M says, are you researching something in Mexico?
Right now, no. For a while, I was in contact with the people in Guanajuato who are in charge of the Museo de las Momias, the mummy museum there. And I got a whole bunch of pictures from them. I have an invitation to go and stay with them and check out that stuff down there. But right now, I'm not researching anything at all in Mexico.
What are you doing over there in Rhode Island? What's your day look like?
My day right now is a little bit weird. So for a while, I was teaching university courses and high school courses.
Okay.
Right now, it's just high school, but because of the coronavirus thing, we're stuck at home. So everything we do is online. So it's online courses. I get done a little bit earlier. Obviously, sometimes at night you're working until late.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I'm currently working on a book with Walter von Kroner, on ceramics. So in my free time, once I'm done with school, um, I'm often working on that thing.
Now, do you have where you live? Do you have objects that you collected, say from Japan, or say dead monks areas, or maybe they sell something related to the dead monk? Do you collect things like that?
I collect
Artifacts?
some stuff like that. The first guy you showed with the red and orange robe, that was kind of the other one, the one that, yeah, that one right there. I have a piece of his robe,
Whoa.
it was cut from the back, that's hanging from a little thing above my living room. And that was really just a gift from the head priest there. I returned 3 years in a row
Mm-hmm.
asking them questions about this individual, and learning more about him. And that was just something they had given me.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I like old stuff. I collect things I find beautiful and unusual.
Mm-hmm.
How about yourself? Do you collect anything like that?
Nah.
No.
No. No. Let me see. Let me see. What do I do? Well, I'm a beekeeper, so I
Oh,
do.
really?
So I do collect plants that will provide nectar and pollen for the bees.
Nice.
Play guitar, but they
Yeah.
collect. I'm not really been a collector, but I tell you what though, I am a collector of wisdom, and I try to gain. And every person I have on this program, I try to gain a little bit of wisdom. So I guess in that way, I would say I'm a wisdom collector.
Probably not helping you out too much. I'm sorry.
Well, this guy back here. Now
He'd probably
look,
be able to help you out. Me, not so
but
much.
look now, you just casually refer to him as the person. Is it a
Yes.
person?
Well, what's really
Individual,
interesting,
or maybe you said individual. Is it a human? What is it?
yeah, what's really interesting, and I included this in one of my books. I think I included it in Living Buddhas. Um, but I visited this guy
Okay.
in Owami, and then I walked over a small mountain to get to Churen Temple, Churenji in
Mm-hmm.
Japanese, where I visited the body of Tetsumonkai. And then I kept going, and over another mountain, there was this body called Homyokai, and it's a private temple. And I got there, and it was kind of strange because I see two like temples that are out in the woods, and they're left alone and look like they haven't been touched in a while. So I went to the main house and main temple, knocked, and there was a woman in there sweeping up, and she's like, "What can I do for you?" And we're speaking Japanese, of course. And I said, "Well, I'm here to visit with Homyokai," and that was the name of this. It was a samurai who ended up killing himself,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully to save his lord, who had developed a sickness. And she said, "Oh, where did you come from? How did you get here?" And I explained where I come from. And then she said, "Tetsumonkai to attan desu ka?" And in
Mm-hmm.
Japanese, that means, did you, it doesn't mean did you see, did you meet with Tetsumonkai? And you'd only use that with a living person, but she did. And these individuals are called living Buddhas, the Soka Shimbutsu. So
Mm-hmm.
I think for the very small minority of people who still think that these individuals are saint-like, that they're considered alive,
Mm.
even though not in our term alive. Like obviously they're dead, but that their spirit still lingers. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Um, Ojinji Kikisuka.
What? What's that?
Okay, that didn't work. Uh, oh,
Are you trying to tell me off in Japanese?
Ojin Kizisuka.
I have no idea.
Dang it. Well, I just Googled, how are you doing in Japanese?
Oh,
Ojin
here it is.
Kikisuka.
Ready?
Go.
O genki desu ka? O genki desu ka?
Ojin, you very smart. You very smart.
No, that's how you pronounce it, though.
Okay, I'll remember that next time. Or
Yeah,
cowboy.
I'm sure
What's
you need
up?
that next time, right?
I can do or street. What's up?
I like that better. That's even better.
Or
Next time I'm
cowboy.
in Japan,
Cowboy.
that's what I'll do. What's up?
Okay, cowboy. How to do?
Let it be.
All right.
Like,
Okay. Hey, here's a question for you. Have you ever heard of Luang Por Pian, a Thai monk whose body did not decay? He died in 2017.
I don't think so.
I may have butchered that anyway. Luang Por
I don't
Pian.
know.
So,
I don't know any Thai. If it's the
okay.
one that you always see pictures with sunglasses on, I've seen them, but I don't know anything about it.
Well, my wife finally got me to go to a Thai restaurant, and now it was so good. I started
Oh, it's
singing.
awesome.
I started singing. I'm a Thai man. Dun, 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 dun. So I don't know. I'm getting weird, man. Something's eating my brain. Maybe mummification. Is there anybody alive that is attempting to self-mummify themselves right now?
I hope not, and I don't think so. But if there were, it's illegal, so you wouldn't hear about it. The last person who actually did it that I know about, I believe he actually died in 1906, and it was made illegal in 1868 with the Meiji Restoration. 1868, it was made illegal, and this guy was in the process of doing it, and he was of no mind. His name was Bukai. He was
Bukai.
in no mind to stop what he was doing. So he buried himself anyways, and for years his body was just left there. And then eventually the Japanese government gave researchers permission to dig the body up. And this was in the early 1960s or late 1950s. I don't remember offhand. But you had guys like Ando, Kosei, and other researchers. They dug Bukai up, and it was the first scientific investigation of self-mummification. And one of their studies appeared in English in a book called Mummies, Disease, and Ancient Culture, edited by Cockburn. But there's tons of text in Japanese on it. That's the last known person that I'm aware of that actually mummified himself.
Now, it seems that Catholic priests back through time have always been dealing with dead bodies. I mean, I know they sort of joined the Day of the Dead with Halloween for All Saints Day. They kind of joined them together, so they're always trying to grab somebody else's religion and then make it work for them. But it seems to me there's an episode by somebody named John Wycliffe. I think he translated the Bible from Latin to English, and I think they burned him at the stake, or they buried him, or I think burned him. I think they buried him. But then they dug him up later. About 50 years later, the Pope, who was still mad, or another Pope, I can't remember. I'm just giving you the basics of it, dug him up and burned him again because they were still pissed because he translated the Bible from Latin to English. And the reason they wanted it in Latin is so that the average person couldn't read it. And then they would charge people. They figured out a way to make some money out of the deal. So they would charge people to in the end, they would chain the Bible to the priest's podium, so you couldn't do it. But they were so mad. So I'm just wondering, when they dug him up and burned him again, so I believe that's the story now. So I believe they burned him twice. They were so mad. Were they concerned that he really wasn't dead?
Tell you the truth, I'm not familiar with that particular story, but I know of similar stories, and I don't think that would be it at all. Again, I don't know this story, but the ones that are similar that I do know about, it's more political statements. Like, you think you want to do this? Look what happened to this last guy. And just in case you forgot, because it was a year before you were born, we're going to dig him up and do it again.
Now, of course, we have the title here, Christian Mummification. So I almost kind of separate. I mean, it's just my personal view. Yeah, to me, Catholics are kind of like their own thing because they're.
Yes, they are.
I mean, they're running around in robes and stuff, and who knows what's going on. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in there. And, I tell you what, though, maybe I'm miffed. Here's the thing. This personal story between me and you, and everybody else just tune out. Me and the doctor's talking here.
No one listen. No one listen. Everyone go away.
Now, they just stopped texting in the live chat. Okay, now they want to know what the hell he's going to say. But anyway, my very first interaction with Catholicism was when my stepmom died. And we had a burial or a service at a Catholic church. Never been in one, never been in church at all then in the early days of my youth. And this priest was walking around the casket with incense and was swinging it around and saying, all your sins are gone. And I was thinking, what's that doing? I mean, what is he?
Yeah.
Are the sins? Are they? Do they latch onto the smoke and go flying out the door, or whatever? Then he goes, and she was a faithful Catholic. It was at service every week. I said, wait a minute, that's an outright lie. She never said nothing about Catholicism, to church, or anything. And so so I'm just saying, my first interaction was the guy was a liar, and I'm thinking, dude, I live there. I know who that's. I know all about this situation, and she never ever said anything or went anywhere. And why did you say that? So maybe I was miffed from the beginning. But anyway, I sort of separate them from Christian, and I see that's in the title here. But is there maybe other types of Christians that have done, in history have mummified, or is it mainly in the Catholic realm?
It's
Say like
Catholic
a Protestant.
and Orthodox.
Okay.
Just Catholic and Orthodox. The rest of them don't. And to most Christians, it makes no sense at all.
Okay. Well, I'm not about to try that, but so
Well, maybe it does. In my experience, with the people I've dealt with the research I've done with other sects of Christianity, it wouldn't make any sense.
I mean, that is a very interesting title. Now, you also sort of, I mean, in a weird leap from self-mummification to UFOs may not be piloted by aliens, I think is what you say. How did you?
Completely unrelated, though. Obviously, this is
Right.
a
I mean,
different topic.
how did you end up over there?
Oh, it's completely different time. Like right now, I'm working on a book on East Asian ceramics. Like obviously, that's not connected to mummification at all. You know? But there is kind of a central theme. There's a central thread. Although, if you looked at some of my works and some of my articles, you'd say, well, I don't see it. It's not there. My doctoral degree is in critical thinking. And obviously, critical thinking, as an educator too, you get people all over the place saying, well, we want to think critically, and my students will think critically. And I'm the one that always comes out and say, most students will never think critically, and most teachers don't want to. And if you ask someone to actually think critically, they'd actually hate you for it. When I did my doctoral dissertation, I always look into whoever I'm dealing with. I looked into the professor. And of course, he's from the Bible Belt. I'm like, this could be an issue, because the whole idea of critical thinking, which we praise in schools, is try to figure out why you believe everything that you believe. Where does it come from? Where is the evidence to support this? And if there's no evidence, you shouldn't be believing it. That's the whole idea of critical thinking. Now, that has nothing to do with people saying, no, this is something good for life. Forget all that for now. Just people who posit that critical thinking is a great thing. If you cannot describe where your idea is coming from, how you support your ideas, that's not evidence of critical thinking. It's evidence of ignorance. So people who champion the idea of critical thinking in schools, you have to be able to say, this is where my idea comes from. This is based on here. This is based on this type of evidence that I found out. And what I found out is the majority of people cannot think critically and don't want to. If you have someone who believes, even in a religious circumstance, believes something, and they can't explain specifically why that holds up to historical scrutiny, there's a problem there as far as critical thinking is concerned. And I'm not saying critical thinking is the most important thing in the world, but educators who champion that have to keep it in mind. If you don't really care about that, like, you know what, to tell you the truth, most of the big religions on this planet, their leaders or their early church founders at one point always said that the way you perceive the world and what you do in it is more important than historical accuracy and historical truths, which is why we have some of the stories that we do in Buddhism, Christianity, Mithraism, Zoroastrianism, and all these other faiths. So if it's one of those that it's really not all that important, if this thing makes your life better, fine, then disregard all this. But if we're actually talking about critical thinking, you have to back up what you believe.
Sort of in a comparison and dragging in the coronavirus crap, there are reports that the Chinese in certain hospitals where people were deemed not worthy to use their resources to
Hmm.
keep them alive. They were actually placed in body bags while they were still alive. Eyewitnesses claim they were put in bags and then incinerated while they were still alive.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there's a long, sordid history of the Chinese government murdering millions of their own people, and there are other countries that have done that sort of as well. But as far as I can tell, while there are a lot of sort of types of religions in China, the basic government view is, I believe, is sort of atheistic or godless, however you want to say it.
I
And,
think
and when
so.
it comes to that point, then the human life becomes a commodity to deal with, and that goes with their one-child policy as well. And they were very ruthless about that. They would take away kids that were born, or prevent, do neuter jobs on people to make sure they didn't have. So what I'm saying is, but if you take a religious person, they're probably not going to allow that to happen in today's world. So is it better to have a religion? Because the alternative, if now, and I gotta say, this goes to the critical thinking. The Chinese would say critical thinking says we don't have the resources to save this 70-year-old. And I mean, they've already done that in some other countries where they said 70 above don't use anything. So they want to be termed euphemistically as a death squad, or people deciding who's going to live and who's not. So they're deciding who's going to live and who's not. But that's from critical thinking. That comes from critical thinking. It doesn't make any sense to help people that only have a couple years left. That's critical thinking. AI would probably make the same decision. So it takes something in a human that is not critical thinking and absolute fact, or as Spock would say, logic. There's something else that says the 70-year-old, the elder needs to be taken care of and needs to be respected and helped through, and resources used to extend their life. So you know what I'm saying? So how far does critical thinking go to where it needs something more human involved with that, say a heart?
So critical thinking as a whole could have both views, that it's important to take care of everyone no matter what age, and what you just mentioned of the Chinese and what I would say was originally the Nazi perspective too, and you brought that up before. They all can think critically. You can have very evil ideas and very good ideas, but they're all attained using critical thinking. But it doesn't mean that you're going to have one type of idea or another. For example, if you set an idea that any human being, no matter what age or what they do, is of intrinsic worth, and I personally believe every single person is. I think every single person came from the same source. We're all brothers and sisters. We're all the same, right? If I can justify that, and believe me, it'd probably take me 30 or 40 pages, but I can justify that. Now, any action I take, if I were in a position of power that protects those lives, is justified. I can, yes, and this is critical thinking. This is a textbook example of critical thinking. Now, if you wanted to go the evil side and say, look, this is our finite resources. Whatever we do isn't really changing anything. Everyone will die. If this person dies now instead of 1 year from now, nothing really changed. They're still dead. The end result is exactly the same, but doing it this way, overall, the whole country, we save $5 billion, whatever it happens to be. That's still critical thinking. Well, of course, we got one that's evil and one that's good. So it has nothing to do with evil and good. It's literally just the ultimate goal of critical thinking as a whole is, why do you believe what you believe? Like, where do your thoughts actually come from? And the more I look into it, I don't even care. I'm not one of those people that thinks, okay, this is definitely true and everything else is false. What I want to do, and this might seem strange to some people, but what I want to do is have everyone question what they actually believe. Everything. Even things that are, oh, this is concrete, it's definitely right here. But if everyone starts questioning everything, then you start eliminating some of the prejudices that you don't even know you had. And then when that happens, you start seeing things a little bit more clearly. And when you start seeing things a little bit more clearly, you see things anew. And once that happens, now progress is made. Now we can take a step ahead.
Okay, I can see that point. and that plays out in college universities across this country. But I notice that which may be deemed critical thinking as well is there's a check valve there. It is that the religious people that may be on campus somehow they are not afforded the same critical thinking believability or acceptance. Let's just say where you say, why would let's just say a gay person, let's just say that, why would they why do they believe like they believe, and why do they hate the religious person and will protest them and will go to the chancellor and say they need to be out of this campus, out of our sororities, and not have any groups allowed on campus. That always seems to, that critical thinking of, well, why do I believe that? Why do I want them off campus? What have they done to me? Why do I think this way? Those thoughts are not challenged by the professors, but the religious person's thoughts are challenged by the professors. Why are you against this gay person? Why do you hate them? I mean, they'll put those out there, even though by and large I would believe it's not true. Maybe they don't accept or agree with their lifestyle choices. Right. But the word is hate is ascribed to them to demean them and end the conversation and take a higher position in the logic of the conversation, so that there's no, it's like an indefensible thing to answer. Mm-hmm. But it's like, to them, it's like, why do you, there's two different things. So it's not what I'm saying is, what you're suggesting, it's not universal. And what you're suggesting is on every campus in America where they claim to be critical thinkers and freedom of thought, and why do you challenge, test everything except for what they already believe. I mean, there are protected thoughts, and if you veer from that, you will be kicked off the campus anyway. So it's not like that. So where is this free thinking going to roll out and have an as you say, an advancement in the conversation?
Well, when I first mentioned this, I think you'll remember I said it's what most students cannot do, and what teachers will be angry if you actually ask them to do it. Teachers don't do it, students don't do it, but many people just say they do. And I think it would lead to advancement if everyone did, but the real problem is, this is where it gets not religious, but a little bit spiritual.
Okay.
You have to kind of get rid of your thoughts and then step back and view your thoughts as an outsider would. Now, obviously, if you have someone who's saying, I hate anyone different, whether they're gay or whatever, it doesn't matter. I hate anyone who's different from me. You got to wonder, where's that coming from? And if it's certain people who grew up in certain types of Christian backgrounds, mm-hmm. it's very difficult, because if they spent 30 or 40 years in that background, and now, like, well, where did my parents' ideas come from? Obviously, my ideas are from them, so my ideas are not independent. I'm not an independent thinker. I'm taking their ideas. Where did it come from? Oh, it came from one book. What if they had read a different book? And then, all right, let's say you want to say, okay, no, everything in this book is fine. Wouldn't it make sense that anyone who believes that goes through and actually looks at the history of that text, right? So in the first century, there was no text, didn't exist. And when you look at existing texts that talk about Jesus and everything that happened, first century Christians claim he never came in the flesh. Mm-hmm. The word Mary wasn't even a name yet. Third century.
Well, doctor, is there a reason why you were born in the United States and not in Africa? Was it just the luck of the draw?
Oh, I have no idea.
Because wouldn't you say, and this is a question I have, I mean, or let's just say you were born in Iran, isn't it likely that you would be a Muslim?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's why I think all religions are superficial. I don't think they matter. Because if you're dealing with one divine power, one source of love, and I wouldn't say luck of the draw, but let's say it's just something inexplicable that we can't explain why we end up where we do. If you have to believe in a certain man-made religious doctrine to end up in some heavenly realm, mm-hmm. then it's rigged. Mm-hmm. Then somewhere before you even born, someone said, you know what? Screw him, screw her, get rid of them. And I don't think that's the case.
Mm-hmm. You know, in the 12 steps of recovery, there's always a spiritual component. And that came from years and years and years of trying, just using psychology, medication. It came to that, and somehow they came to find out that if adding that component would keep the recidivism way lower, because it does something on some kind of intrinsic level, subatomic level, spiritual level. Something is there that connects, that gives us strength to make a change and to walk a better path. But without it, it virtually fails. So it isn't just really, say, a book that people should be looking at. It should be a spiritual journey,
Yes.
that can give them the strength in that spiritual realm, I guess you could say. But but what if, okay, you said, I said luck of the draw, and what was your term? Inexplicable. Why?
Yeah, well, the truth is, I think it's just something that you can't explain. But
Okay, but what if? Why don't we
sorry.
posit this in our critical thinking? What's to prevent us from thinking maybe there is a grand design and we're all part of this design, and the designer put me here at this place and time?
Definitely a possibility. And tell you the truth, that's kind of what I think. I really do. So if I ended up being, just because of where I'm growing up, a Shinto believer or a Muslim or a Jainist, that's what I'm supposed to be doing to serve, whatever term you want to use. If you want to say to serve God, that's what I'm supposed to be doing, which wouldn't make a ton of sense to people with dogmatic views. But if you get rid of the dogmatic views in any religion, you simply say, you know what? I'm doing what I think I'm supposed to be doing in life, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. In those cases, I think you're then living out your life as best as you can. And I think you're giving as much as you can to society, whether you think so or not.
Through your writings and your books, how do you feel like you've contributed to humanity?
Interesting question, because always, human beings are always a source of failure. So, me looking back, even 20 years from now, I can't say I offered anything that's of real value. Because even think of the texts I write, right? I write books on history. At the end of everything, at the end of everyone's life, when we were looking at these things, and I got one in front, I have this book in front of me because of the dates, because I don't remember what date people died and that kind of thing. And I got another one over there. I got others in the back room. Writing books on self-mummification, writing books on Christian mummification, doesn't really matter. Like, it's just history. Now, obviously, I'm a historian. I like history. I write about history because it's something I enjoy. It's something I think my readers enjoy. But at the end of the day, who cares? Like, when we're all on our deathbeds, this stuff doesn't matter. So all of this, I think, is superficial fluff.
Now,
that's how I denigrate everything I've ever did in my entire life. Right there it is.
Wow.
It's all superficial fluff.
That is some shocking honesty, Doctor.
I'm not going to lie to you.
Wow.
Now, of course, while we're here, we might find this stuff interesting. And when I die, someone might look at this like, you know what? He said this. I'm going to explore this a little bit further. And same deal. That person then comes up with 3 books on the specific arsenic solution that one of these guys used. And it'll be interesting to a couple people who are really, really fascinated with chemicals or something like that. But for the majority of the human race, it doesn't matter. It's all no.
Well, Dr. Kenneth Jeremiah, people need your books like they need sports, and the people, those are outlets. Now the Christian mummification and people self-mummifying themselves, and the story of, as you said, somebody burying themselves and having a tube put down there and they're breathing and tinkling bells. It's pretty interesting stuff. Sometimes we need a diversion, and these days of want and woe, it's dire out there for a lot of folks. So maybe the diversion of having a topic is so out there, it could be helpful to somebody psychologically. So maybe you've helped more than you thought you have.
Well, as a diversion, yes. As a diversion, it's fine. But if people get too wrapped up in these types of things, And of course, I think I did. You can't write these kind of books if you don't get too wrapped up in it. But if you get too wrapped up in this, you lose track of everything else. You know,
Mm.
you could spend years researching something that happened in the 1600s. Then you're 90 years old. Like, wait, where did the time go?
Hmm.
What did I do?
Okay, so I want to help you. I want to help you with your next project. I'm going to give you. I mean, I'm going to feed you some. So, all right. So, you obviously got talent, writing skills, investigative skills. You can speak Japanese. I mean, that's a plus. I mean, so in the resume section, that's a plus. Okay, so you need to write a book that will help people, that will make a difference. Okay, so let's brainstorm. What interests you that you feel could help somebody?
You know what's interesting? I wrote a book um, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, and I entitled the thing initially "A Spiritual Approach to Writing and Art." And my real point for the whole book was I research all religions. And for
Mm-hmm.
years, I don't know where this fascination originally came from, but this has happened for decades. I've researched the holy text of almost every religion you can possibly think of. And I got this really weird practice that when I read something, I highlight the interesting portions, and then I'll go back and reread those highlighted portions. And after that, in my library, I know where the quotes are. So if I need it for
Mm-hmm.
something, I can go back to that text.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did, I put this book together and I was thinking, you know what? Of all the like specialty books I'm writing, I'm going to write one for the general public and they're going
Okay.
to like this. It'll be a spiritual approach to art and writing and it shows the indistinguishability between all of the world's spiritual traditions and just how everyone's the same, even though you think you're different. Get rid of the external differences. This is it. This is what we all really are. And these are how to express it through art and writing, the things I know. I have no artistic ability, really, but my mother's an art teacher. Um, and she has incredible artistic ability. My father's a musician, incredible ability there. I can just write about what other people do. You know, I just sit here and do this thing. So I sent that thing to publishers who have previously published my work, and the response, the overwhelming response I got from everyone is, you'll never get this published because it doesn't focus on a specific religion. And I said, but that's the whole point of the book. And it has nothing to do with religion's spiritual practices. That's it. Get rid of the idea of religion, just spiritual practice. Like, yeah, people won't read that. So one of the publishers suggested we switch the title to Zen Art, Zen Writing. I said, all right, fine. But now it's just focused on Zen people. And I got quotes from Mother Teresa in there. I got quotes from Jesus in there. Like, it defeats the purpose. And then at the end of it, this went through, I don't know if you've ever been involved in the publishing process, but you submit something to a publisher, you get a response within about 3 months, they send it back to the board, you get a response in 6 months, and they say, okay, we're going to go forward or not. And then from there, you got a year to a year and a half before the thing's actually published. After about 3 to 4 months, we got it back saying, yeah, it's too general. So if you want to rewrite it for Zen people, fine. I'm like, the whole idea of the book is now gone. That's something I thought would actually help people. Like I thought people would like it. And what do I get from the publishers? No.
Hmm.
And there's another issue with that too. When you're dealing with a publisher, let's say you're dealing with a history book, right? You're looking for a major publisher. But if you go to a major publisher with a history book, they already have the year's history books out there, which means if they take another history book on, it's going to possibly cut into the same profits that they're already making.
Mhm.
So the competition is within the same publisher. So they'd look and they'd say, well, if we publish this one, are we going to get more profit? And if they come up with the idea like, no, because it's going to take away from this book a bit, so you get equal profit, why would you pull on another writer?
Hmm.
So what they typically do is spend the majority of their money on one or two major books, fill in the gaps with specialty
Mm-hmm.
books on the side.
I see that.
But you're not going to have two major books by the same publisher. And if you look at the major publishing houses, especially in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
they typically one or two books. That's it. And they put everything into those. So the other books take a back seat. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
now I really think within the next 10, 20 years, even literature
Okay.
is going to start disappearing a little bit.
Okay. Let me.
It'll all
Okay.
come on.
Let me do something here. Okay. For the people in the live chat, Dr. Kim wants to write a book. I want anybody who's listening to the program write in just the title of a book that Dr. King can, the heading of a book that he can use to help people. Just what book would you like to see? And let's see what we get. Somebody out there may think about it. Dr. Ken wants to write a book. People suggest a title. What kind of book would Dr. Ken write to help people? And by the way, we just got a thing in the live chat says the guest tonight is shockingly truthful.
Well,
now I don't think I get that with a lot of guests, Doctor.
I could be lying. You'd never know if I was lying, especially if I'm good at it.
That means your heart is tender is what it means. It can learn. It's not dogmatic. It's pliable. Really, for really, I'm going to go this way. Your heart is moldable from the great designer's hands. Something to come into your life.
I hope so. Who knows?
So hey, he knows. Look, man, I'm a believer. I'll be shockingly honest with you, and he's got something good for you, and he knows you're searching, and a lot of people are searching. Your search probably. I'm going. This is my own opinion, not yours, but I think somewhere in your writings and your research, even with these mummies, you might have been searching for something and didn't even know it, and you ended up writing those books.
I would guarantee that, yeah. Because looking at these things, I mean, obviously we're dealing with historical phenomena. But
hey, let me interrupt you. They're coming in, Doctor. Here you go. Chuck, you might get a pen. Chuck Donald says, Arcturian critical thinking techniques.
Arcturian.
Yeah. Our moderator, Jade, says, from Buddha to Jesus, a life's journey. Rose says, how to be spiritual without being religious. Wow. Anybody else got any ideas? Just put them in the live chat, man. So hey, how you like that?
Oh, I got 3 of them.
Hey man, I love our chat. There's chats everywhere. We've got the best chat, bar none, anywhere. And there's no creepy stuff in there, and the people like love each other and talk to each other. It's crazy. I don't even see any insults. I'm saying, can somebody go to insult somebody? No, they're not doing that.
There's too much insults on the news and on on Facebook, and that's all everyone's doing these days. And I think too, people are getting stir crazy right now. They're spending too much time alone. They got too much time on their hands, and it's now like, what can I say bad about someone else?
Okay, here's another one. Here's another one from Kimberly Miller.
I got it. A pen.
Book title: Why We Matter. Here's another one. No Such Thing as a Coincidence. Man, these are good. All right, well, we'll see what in a little bit of time we have left. See if something else pops up. And somebody did ask the question. I've kind of been delayed at waiting to see where it fit in the conversation. But it says, name some Christians who've been mummified. Are they?
Tons of them. Saint Rita, Saint Cassia, Saint Veronica of Siena. Tons of them. Like here's if you want a full list of them, there was a book published in the 1960s by Joan Carroll Cruz called The Incorruptibles. She lists all of them, and every body that she mentions is mummified. The only thing that's been, I'm not disrespecting her book because at the time she didn't know this, but the only thing that's been proven false is that she calls a lot of those bodies miraculous preservation. And none of them are. Every body that's been investigated has been artificially preserved, organs removed, or the body was treated with an arsenic-based solution. But at the time, the church didn't allow scientists to come in and look at the bodies. So nothing against her. She didn't know that. She put this book together, though, and it's a great book. It's worthwhile. Joanne Carroll Cruz, called The Incorruptibles. It has a list of all of them for you.
Okay, I've got a couple more book titles for you. I don't think we mentioned this one, Why We Matter, and then there's this one here. A book on not being afraid of viruses.
Oh, God. Since I have no background in virology, I can't do that.
All right, here's one. Jesus Flashlight in the Darkness. This is kind of funny here. I don't think this is a book title. I think it's more of a question. Will RBG be mummified? Do you know that's Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I believe. I think
Oh, okay.
that was on the humorous side there. Um, what else we got here? What about Saint Bernadette?
Of Siena, Saint Bernadette of Siena, yeah. And I think her head, I think, is still in Siena. They chopped her body up, right?
Hmm.
If I'm thinking of
Wow.
the right one. So what they would typically do is some individuals that were considered especially holy, they had that divine energy, the merit that the Buddhists would call, but the Christians had the same divine energy. And the idea, the Christian idea of the soul actually came from the Egyptians, and they had 8 different parts of the soul. That was cut down a little bit in Christianity, and Catholic Christianity even had the idea of a like a guardian angel, which was part of it. But you had this supposedly a divine energy that, or divine essence, maybe is a better word, that infused the body. So when people wanted to be near the remains of a saint, they'd have to travel to the Roman Catholic Church. And in fact, according to the Roman Catholic Church, if you have an altar, you have to have the body of a saint, or at least the body part of a saint underneath it, for it to be an altar by canonical law. Outside of Europe, since there weren't any saints, they didn't care what people outside did. But in Europe, if you're at a church that actually has a holy altar, there has to be a body part. So Saint Catherine of Siena, they cut her up and sent different pieces to different places. There's some at a nunnery in
She ain't coming back.
no, but it was all for the purpose of whatever spiritual essence is there. They want it to be diffused. They want it everywhere, as big
Now,
as
but
possible.
it could be like the liquid guy on Terminator.
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
so. I
no,
think
no matter what,
so.
they're coming back together. All right, got another book title, "The
Uh-oh.
Incorruptibles: A Study of the Incorruption in the Bodies of Various Catholic Saints and Beati." I'm not sure what that
Yes.
is.
So whoever just wrote that in, there's a book by Giuseppe Falica, and it's in Italian. It is in Italian. So if you can read Italian, that book already exists, and he
Oh,
did a great job with it. I am against some of his ideas, and in my book, Christian Mummification, which talks about this, I highlighted a bunch of his ideas and then explained why I'm against those and the historical reasons why. But that's nothing to take away from his work. Giuseppe Falica. It's called. I think it's actually just called the Incorruptibles.
now,
The Incorrotti.
now, see, I would advise against Christians mummifying themselves because
Yeah.
the Bible says the Bible says something like the dead in Christ shall rise, and then the sea shall give up their dead. But it seems like those people are kind of like normal dead people, and maybe if they're mummified, then that might thwart your 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 reactivation, your reanimation, man. I don't think somebody should mess around with mummifying themselves.
In Christianity, there was no self-mummification.
Okay.
Self-mummification was only Chinese and Japanese.
Hmm.
Christianity, it was an artificial mummification where clergy members came in and mummified people they thought were holy, and it comes from the rapture. So if you read the Bible, I suggest everyone do this who hasn't read the Bible in a while. Read the rapture. According to the rapture, you need the physical body to get to heaven. Now, I don't believe that because if you look at when it was written and why it
Hmm.
was written, and it doesn't make any sense to me historically. It doesn't make any sense to me from a religious perspective or a spiritual
Hmm.
perspective. But according to the book of Revelation, you cannot be cremated. You must have your body because that body is transformed to a spiritual body. That's the actual quote from the English translations of it.
Well, I'll tell you what, I like what you just said because I'm absolutely dead set against being torched.
Hmm.
Because it seems to me it's going to be really hard to reassemble, man, if you're like grains of sand. You know what I'm saying? So I'm with you on that. So, I'm glad you suggested that. The other thing is, and I'm just getting late here, but there's another thing. You talk about the rapture, and perhaps as a human being, we have a spiritual DNA, but as an organic body, we have the organic DNA. But I'm wondering if the push towards AI and the infusion of technology and the human body itself, or perhaps even the genome or the DNA sequence or something, if we get in there and alter it, then I'm wondering if we say we go to rise up, that there's a DNA check valve that only the divinely created, inspired human can come in. But if the DNA's been changed, that might not be, you might not be able to pass.
Yeah, and who knows?
Well,
I see what you're saying, though. I understand it.
Okay, well, all right then. I think that's a good way to end right there. Hey, oh, wait a minute. Here's an interesting question. This is from Paul Sishi. He says, this is a question for you. Who is Dr. Kenneth Jeremiah?
How do you answer one of those questions? I think if we are researching the important things in life, that's the one question every single one of us has to be asking. And I think if you ever discover that answer, you're done here. You don't need to be here anymore.
Oh.
You can move on. So I think the question, who are all of us? Who is every single one of us? Is the thing we should concentrate on. Forget politics and differences, and forget all the stupid minutia that takes up our daily lives. Look inside. Set yourself away from everything else. Noise. Control your thoughts. Get rid of your thoughts. And actually look within. And that's not an easy process. And when you start doing it, it'll be difficult. You'll hate it. Then you'll start to like it. And as time progresses, you'll figure things out. When you figure everything out, then you're done.
Then you're done. All right, and we are done as well. Dr. Kenneth Jeremiah, did you like being on the program tonight?
I did. Thank you very much for having me. And I will be in touch. I'll send you a friend request on Facebook, and I'll contact you this week or next week or something like that. I wish you all the best. I know this is trying times, difficult times, but we'll all make it through it. We will.
All right, Dr. Kenneth Johnson, can we have you, Jeremiah, can we have you on again the program sometime?
Of course, anytime you'd like.
All right, I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, bye-bye.